All right. So let's reflect. What is one change or one thing that changed in your life this week or this year? You have the license to choose one thing that has changed in your life recently that you didn't expect and how you dealt with it. One thing that has changed in your life that you did not expect and how you dealt with it. I'm looking to hear from all of us. So, at least we're quite a few on the call. So, what is one thing that changed in your life that you didn't expect and how did you deal with it? Let's go. I know we have stories. You can raise your hand if you're going to do a brief storytelling session. We're open to that. One thing that changed in your life this year, this week, that you did not expect and how you dealt with it. All right. Anybody? One thing that changed in your life that you did not expect and how you dealt with it. Because remember, the topic is we're dealing with being adaptable in the face of change. Anyone who's confident enough to drop it in the comment section or drop it in the chat, and we would be glad to read them out for you. One thing that changed and how you dealt with it. Come on, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing that changed in your life that you didn't expect and how you dealt with it. Okay. Or have our lives all changed so dramatically and we haven't dealt? That's a possibility. So let me share one. Many of you know that my weekends are spent with young people. And one thing that changed that I didn't see this year is that when we started, we had enough time for our service. But as we've gone on and we've become more intentional about um, meeting, we would always run into the next service. So ours is 9 to 10:30, and there's another one at 11. So what happened is we will always run into the 11 o'clock one. We would be finishing at 10:40, 10:50, and they do have to do a few things before service starts. So what did we do? Number one, the 9 a.m. service we pushed back to 8:30. Number two, in that service, we minimized our sharing and then we ensured that the next service we give them enough time. So what is happening is we're actually finishing at 10:30 and they have time. And then for the second service, we pushed it back by about 15 minutes so that there's no mad rush to go there. It was unexpected because we didn't think these guys would want to spend so much time together. We didn't think the conversations would be that deep. All right. So that was unexpected for us. I can see on this end talking about things that happened. I see burnout got to the edge of it. I'm starting my days with 5 minutes of silence and rest is intentional. Excellent. The question is, what is one thing that has changed in your life this year and what did you do about it? The second response I see is respond. Okay, I'm assuming that you responded to someone in a certain way that didn't go quite right and now you have learned measured response. Okay. You see, it's like that place of unexpectedness is where a lot of who we are really comes out, like really comes out. And that's what we want to talk about today. Okay. So, staying adaptable and turning disruption into direction is important because it will help us understand that adaptability as a growth mindset, not a reaction. See how change can spark creativity and opportunity. And we'll give practical tools and strategies. We will explore at the interlink of how AI can help us. And then by the end of it, our prayer is that you would have committed to one shift. You would have committed to one shift. All right. Why is that important? It's of utmost importance because then we must be consistently growing. So let's understand adaptability first because change is constant. I remember my teachers in high school telling us change is the only thing that is constant in life. And they said that on the back of we're told we had an exam on a certain topic and then they went and they said something else. It was so upsetting. But when the teacher came back and said change is the only thing that is constant, What it began to do for me is it began shifting my mind. So I figured adaptability, adjustment, responsiveness is a choice. So how do I begin to build towards that? So the truth about change, it comes suddenly without warning very often. Sometimes you can see the lily and mvua, which is really the signs of rain, but sometimes, and by and large, a lot of the time, it just smacks you like, what? You mean it's possible for life to change like that? And then it also reveals your flexibility. For many of us, we are so change averse. When something changes, we go in the corner, we hold our heads, we cry, we whine, we get stuck there. Other people around us keep moving. I remember I had a friend during COVID when everybody was hunkering down and worried and scared. They were out building business. They just expanded one production line and boom, they were so busy. By the time the rest of us figured, we could be doing things, these guys had moved. Right? So it reveals flexibility. It can take you out if you're unprepared. How many of us have been in situations where something happens that was so left field, we did not see it coming, and we get stuck there in perpetuity, as in we get stuck there for so long. So it can take you out if you're unprepared. It is one of life's biggest constants. And you see, think about it. Every day you're growing a day older, so your body is changing. If you were in your 20s once and you're in your 40s now, there are things you cannot do. If you're in your 40s now and your 60s, there are things you cannot do. So it is constant. It is there with us, liwe liwalo, whether we like it or not. And it really demands flexibility and creativity over control. We get stuck when things change if we're looking for utmost control. But if we can see how to adjust and adapt to life, then change doesn't keep us bound. The word in my mind is hamstrung. You know, we all have a hamstring on the back of our legs. Yeah, if you break your hamstring, you can no longer walk. That's why I use hamstrung. All right. So let's define adaptability. It's the ability to adjust your strategy without abandoning your purpose. It's the ability to adjust your strategy without abandoning your purpose. A few years ago, a mentor said to me, you write your vision in ink, you write your purpose in ink, you keep your tactics in pencil. Now, that was useful to me because then when things would change, I wouldn't be so concerned about are we changing everything, or I would move it to what needs to be changed. The Apostle Paul thrived in change because he said, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance. In fact, the side of this scripture I love is he said, I have learned to abound and abase. I have learned to have a lot and have nothing. And in that place is where he learned contentment. Now, it is possible for him to have lived like that because he was anchored in purpose. He knew he was called to teach the word of God. He had been one of the most educated Pharisees known to date. He had sat under Gamaliel, he had trained, he had been one of the hands and the feet of the chief priests when they were trying to stop the Christianity moving around. And then he had his encounter, pivotal. It didn't matter whether he was in prison, it didn't matter whether he had food, it didn't matter that he was in a new town. Every place he went, every difference he encountered, he was able to surmount and overcome. So, in the MSME context, what does change look like? Market shifts. In Kenya, let me use 2024 as the example. We were complaining, and then our Gen Zs took to the street to defend something they did not like. And for the next several months, every Thursday without fail, we had a demonstration. So, what did we have to do? We had to figure how to sell Thursday goods on Wednesday or Friday. And it was clear. They closed down, went to the streets on Thursday. Friday, we're back to business. Next week, Thursday. Friday, we're back to business. Nobody saw it coming. Then, in the weeks where there was not enough adjustment, what did they do? They added Tuesday. Very aware that if you close down the economy for too many days, even they would suffer. But the change they saw coming was too much for them to sit and just accept. So they adapted. All right. Customer behavior changes. So now we are buying more online, which means you need a strong digital presence. You need a last mile delivery system. Last mile delivery, for those who are not sure what that is, it is how things move from you to your customer and get into their homes. With the advent of social spaces, how clear is your profile on in terms of what you're selling? The other one we all know is economic pressure, inflation. Inflation directly affects the price of everything or a disrupted supply chain. So you can remember, let me go back to the protest story. When they're on the street, goods could not move. So if you're a truck driver who has to get to Kisumu by Saturday, would there be days you'd have to drive longer so that for this one day when you cannot move, because it was across the country, this one day you cannot move, you would be in a safe space and not caught in the middle of nowhere? So there's supply chain disruptions. When think about during COVID, when deliveries were taking an extra 6 weeks. So there are things we ran out of. There are businesses that tanked because they could not get their product in time. If we live a life where we think that everything will be hunky dory, always perfect, never challenging, the day a challenge hits you, the day a significant change happens, you get stuck. Let's look at the family context. If we lose one parent, how does that shift the family? If you lose a child, how does that shift the family? If a job, somebody's made redundant, we need to understand that sometimes these things happen. I was telling somebody I was made redundant from my first job at the age of 28. So whereas I'm meeting people who have never faced redundancy until they're in their mid 40s, it was the second year, third year of my career, I think. Yeah. My third year in to employment. I went into the office one morning. I was thankfully going to resign, but I walked in and my boss said, I'm reorganizing and we don't need your position anymore. And then I said, actually, I was thinking of leaving. And she was so relieved that she didn't have to fire me. I could put in my resignation. But I was 28. That day significantly changed my life because now I knew jobs can end, right? So what are we preparing to work with? You see, doesn't replace adaptability, it strengthens it. And that's why change and AI must be closely intertwined. Yeah. It gives us the ability to see change sooner, respond smarter, and act faster. So I'm bringing this front end so that as we go through, you are beginning to look through your own segment or your own organization and see where can you harness AI tools to help you adapt better. You see, fear can slow you down. AI gives you clarity. It shows you this is where we are, this is what is not working, this is how we are going. It also helps you turn confusion into insight. Remember, you're able to take information applied to a tool to do a faster, deeper analysis than you would have done. You can even use it preemptively. So look and say, this is the situation in the market. This is where it could possibly go. What are potential trends over the next 6 months? And it's able to predictively tell you based on the data it has. All right. So those are the things you must be thinking about. How do you become the leader who uses tech to help you anticipate and navigate change? Because we've said that change is the one thing that will always happen. Because when you put now your thinking, your experience against AI, you create momentum. So just hold that in your spirit as we go. Okay? So, what if change is or can be your signal to shift, to innovate, instead of giving you absolute panic? When you feel your relationship begin to change, don't bury your head in the sand. Begin to look and see. Like last week, we said, out of the box thinking challenges the current scenario and begins to look at how do we adapt. The realization that disruption can give us direction is what will help us assess where we are and help us navigate to where we need to be. All right. So maybe the thing that is changing, however simply, however subtly, is the thing that will give you that signal that it's time to think different instead of panicking. Young people very often around me are like, but life is so hard. It is. The difference is when you now build in the capacity and the skills you need to adapt, you become stronger and better at dealing with life. So life appears simpler. I keep telling my young people, we get stronger so we are able to deal with more. Okay? So let's jump on why does adaptability matter? You see, rigid systems break, flexible ones bend. So think about a pencil. Or I don't know if you've seen them. We have the regular ruler, and then there's the flexi one, the one that you can actually roll, hold around your fist. You open it up, it flattens. Rigidity in our thoughts, in our attitudes, in our feelings will cause us to break. All right. But if we have built in the capacity to be flexible, what happens is we bend and then we flip back. We may not flip back 100%, we may flip back slightly to an angle, but we bounce back. You see, adaptability is closely tied to resilience because adaptability comes from the place of knowing I will not always be in control, but I can always make it count. I can always shift and change the tactic. Remember, vision and purpose, we write in ink, tactics are in pencil. So let's say we had set a target to do 10 million connections in 10 years, and then we enter a pandemic year like we did in 2020. In 2020, life stopped, but there was the capacity to reorganize, right? The capacity to reorganize how we did business so that we would still be thriving. There's some people who had to completely close shop. The event industry was at a standstill for 2 years. There is a large percentage who have not restarted, but everybody I know in that industry who has restarted has reconfigured. That is why because they were flexible. So, what are the common barriers to adaptability? The fear of losing control. Or we feel that we must do everything, handle everything, have every T crossed, have every I dotted by us, not by others, by us. And in this space, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot about delegation. So, what happens when you're in that space? Your decisions are slow, you will hit burnout, and there is no space for innovation. How about building trust with your team so you can delegate to them? How about building trust? Or how about finding tools that give you visibility over what is being done instead of micromanaging people? You see, control makes us rigid. Efficient systems allow us to see what we need to see without micromanaging. Let's closer to home for ladies. If you're running a home, you have a housekeeper, you have a schedule that you need worked, why should you be the one washing the clothes, washing the dishes, keeping them? Building a schedule. Teach your housekeeper how to do what needs to be done. You teach her how to do what needs to be done. And when that is done, you come back and see the results. So whereas let's say Tuesday is a day for laundry and on the same day is a day for cleaning X number of bedrooms in the house, don't sit there watching her do it. Let her do her work. If she reorganizes the order for effectiveness on her part, step back. And a lot of us, we want them to do things the way we would do them because breathe. step back. The point is, by the end of that day, the required tasks are done. By the end of the day, I know a housekeeper who laundry day is Thursday. Clothes will be washed at a point on Thursday. Some weeks it's early morning, some it's Thursday afternoon, depending on the amount of work or the situation. Okay? So we need to learn to delegate. The second barrier is clinging to old success formulas. Because it worked yesterday, it will work today. Maybe, maybe not. So instead of being stuck in certain models with declining engagement, let's say you always put up a 10-minute video on your socials and it's always worked, and suddenly you don't have visibility. Do you keep putting up the 10-minute one, or do you begin testing with 15-second, 30-second, 1 minute, 3 minutes, and see which one is currently in vogue and do that one? So you audit what's still fruitful, retire what is outdated, and really it's around the question of what does my market need and what are they willing and able to pay for? All right. The third one is a lack of real-time information. And this is where we get stuck because we are guessing. Everything in our lives has data. Simple things like friendships. You can check who responds the most to your messages, the fastest. You can see who is on the front lines, who is never there. You can see when you're doing a project at work, who volunteers, who has to be coerced or forced to work. You can see it. The data is there. So there's no point of guessing, because guessing leads to poor timing and missteps. So the thing we must do is we must set up systems that track metrics. If it's in the business, what are your sales? What is the engagement? What is the feedback? When you go to your social channels, they will all tell you the best time to capture, connect with your target audience. So if you're told the best time to connect with your target audience is Monday at 8 a.m. and you come on Sunday at 3 p.m., huh? Did you go and look for your real-time information? Again, this is where we harness tools and AI to spot patterns, because we are then able to do a better job. The fourth reason is resistance to tech and new skills. In this day and age, the thing that will take us to the next level is tech. You don't have to learn every single layer of tech. You just have to learn the ones that will simplify your life. You know these ads that tell you, oh, in 21 days you'll be a professional? I actually eventually signed up for one of those things. The things I have learned in 2 weeks. Eish, my prompt game is up. The quality of work I deliver is up. I understand 4 more apps I didn't know before. I may not use them because on this side of the world, they are not free. That side of the world, they're telling you can use it for free. Here you sign up, you get to do 3 tasks, and then it's paid. So I wouldn't use them, but I know more. All right. So how do you work over your resistance? You learn something new every month. Read a book, learn a new tool, learn a new skill, because technology is equipping. For you, it is a tool, a new tool in your toolkit that will take you further. And the final reason that we don't adapt is emotional fatigue and change overload. We've been through too many trying things. We're in the midst of too much pressure, and that pressure kills creativity. But here's the thing. After you rest, reflect, and reconnect with your purpose, in stillness, you will find clarity. You'll have the fuel for innovation. Come back and use tech. There was a period of time where I would have the basic idea I needed to write something, but the pathway to effectively do it well. So that is actually how I learned exploring tech. I sat with ChatGPT, I sat with Canva AI, I found Gemini for research, and that is how I got into using AI for the things I do. I always know what I want, so I'm giving it a prompt to help me filter through stuff. And then we come back and we adapt and we edit because we all know that these are large learning models, so they were still learning, so there are things they do not know. So, what we need us to remember is that adaptability begins when we stop resisting change. We don't stop resisting and just sit there. We stop resisting and start learning from it. The questions are what happened? Why did it happen? What could we have done different? Who was involved? Who was not? Where could this have gone different? So you're asking yourself all these reflective questions, and from the data your questions give you, you're able to reorganize a pattern, reorganize a system, adapt a process. So if we come and we sit in our space and know change is inevitable, what we do is we set ourselves up for great success. All right? So if you are with me, please put a triple R in the chat. If what we have done so far makes sense, let me put a triple R in the chat, which is all about rest, reflect, and reconnect to overcome emotional fatigue. Excellent. Triple R. So when you understand the barriers you're working against, that is when you can reorganize where you are. And you see, what we are doing, thank you, KDN, what we're doing is in these spaces, we skill ourselves to be different. We skill ourselves to be different. So, how do we turn disruption into direction? You see, change doesn't have to confuse you. Oh, no. In fact, I like to think of change as a clarifier. It helps me figure a lot of things, like I've just said. So, a few things. I think there are about 6 things I'd like us to look at. And I've talked about them. I'm just putting them into a framework right now. So, number one, pause. Pause and perceive. You're observing what's going on, why it's going on, what triggered it, where it came from, who brought it in, who kicked what out. You are observing. And then when you've looked at everything there, you ask yourself one question. What is this shift teaching me? I remember talking to a group of young people last Friday on a TikTok live, and we were talking about you get to a place where things are not working, and somebody says they ask, why me? I said, how about we flip the question? Because for me, God doesn't answer why me. To Lord, how does this honor you? How does this place of challenge and trouble honor you? Boom, shift in the mind. Because the day I asked that, I saw how my ability to like nyenyekea, to remain humble and committed to his path shifted. I stopped coming from the place of the entitled little girl who wanted a free life to understand that every shift and every change is a growth step. All right. So pause and perceive. Number two, pivot with purpose. Realign your product, your process, your service, your communication, your relationship. Realign it to purpose because remember, when we start things for a reason. Remember, we said write your vision and purpose in ink, tactics in pencil. So, this shift, you can go back and say, this is who I am, this is what we're working on, this is where we're going. How do we adjust the situation to purpose? You keep your mission the same, but you change your method or your tactics. And type new parts, try new things, tests. Let's say, like, back to the example of socials, the 10-minute no longer gets you the kind of engagement and visibility you need. How about going back and trying a 15-second? A 30-second, 60-second, 90-second, and 3 minutes from there. What that does for you is that it gets you to a place where you can test which one is getting more traction. Again, test your tone, test your level of engagement, test your type of content. Maybe if you did a rant, it would get more impact. Maybe if you did a short, a very short definition, you go prototyping and testing. How does that help you? It gives you quick feedback that you can learn from. All right? So we pause and receive, we pivot with purpose, we prototype new parts, and then we plug into insight and innovation. Once you have done all these things, you now assess all your data. If you need to plug it into something to create a model, go ahead. If you need to figure out your finances and you need to do a financial modeling, go and do it in Excel. Use an AI tool that will be able to analyze for trends and simulate outcomes, simulate impact. So then a quick example is ask ChatGPT, how can I serve this market differently based on the current trends? You could ask something like Gemini based on all the information you have on this particular sector, this particular age bracket, this particular need. What are the potential trends for the next 6 months? And then you come back and say, how do we adjust from where we are so that in those 6 months we're in the right place? And then you bring your teams together and you figure out the roadmap and you assign tasks on the roadmap. What are you doing? Everybody's taking responsibility for the growth process. Nobody's sitting on their hands, and you are going to move faster. So, a quick example of that, think about Joseph in the Bible. He was sold by his brothers, first of all, disliked by his brothers, thrown in a pit. His cloak was messed up and taken back to their father. Then he was sold. Okay? So when he was sold, he ended up in Potiphar's house and then he ended up in jail. When he was in jail, he interpreted the dream of Pharaoh. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream and he ended up being given limelight. So what was the dream? 7 years of plenty, 7 years of lack. And in the 7 years of plenty, because he was adaptable and he listened to the voice of God closely, he was able to give them a strategy. The strategy was in the 7 years of plenty, save and collect everything you have. So they built storehouses in every region, huge, massive things, filled them with grain. When the 7 years of lack came, Egypt never lacked. They sold to their neighbors. And so the people came and bought. When their money was finished, he said, okay, bring me your livestock. They bought in trade of their livestock. When their livestock was done, they traded their land. When their land was done, they traded themselves. What happened at the end of it? Pharaoh was supreme again. All right? He hadn't been able to think and by revelation and assessment find new trajectories, they would have been without food. So, what is it that is in your hands, that is in your wheelhouse, that is in your industry, that is in your face, that you are divinely designed to take charge of and settle? Okay? Now, let's jump into a few practical tools that we can use. One of the key tools we can use is scenario mapping. Remember, we're looking for simple habits that we can carry. So, we've already done a measure of it. Plan for the best, understand what the worst scenario could be and what other likely outcomes you'll find along the way before they happen. What does that do? It prepares your mind and systems to be responsive quickly instead of, oh my, what are we going to do? When you have learned to live in the predictive place where you look at best scenario, worst scenario, and everything in between, when something happens, you can quickly gauge, are we at best? Are we at worst? Are we in between? And you have some basic ideas that you can fine tune when something shifts. So, scenario plan. The second thing we can do is set up what we call the agility hour. Okay? The agility hour. You dedicate 1 hour a week to review what's working, what's not. For some of us, we might need to do that 1 hour a week several times because we're in several things. If you're a mother running a home, you need to do agility hour around how your home runs, around how your children are, around how you work, whether you're in business or you're employed. Okay. But you use this time to make minor adjustments, replan priorities, and realign your activities with your goals, your purpose, your mission. Remember, the mission is one, the purpose is one. Those two are often used interchangeably. How you execute that, how you get there to your tactics is different. So let me pick an example from earlier. One of us said rest is intentional, and now they begin the day with 5 minutes of silence. Many of us wake up and we either jump into prayer, jump into a book, get on socials. She has decided every morning, 5 minutes of silence. How did she get there? By sitting and assessing her week, her life, her day, and understanding that rest must be multidimensional. Okay? So, number three is digital upskilling. Learn something new. Learn an app, learn an AI feature, learn a digital process. Every month, increase your capacity to harness technology to get to where you need to get to. It keeps you relevant, it keeps you efficient and competitive. So learn the app or the skill or the tool that will support the audience you support. All right. So I would not necessarily go and learn financial modeling because where the community I support are not yet there, I will not learn the advanced element of it, but I will learn the basics. So that what can I do when I sit with an MSME in a coaching session? We can figure out what is on the plate. We can figure out where they're coming from and all those things. So learn something new every week. Number four, create feedback loops. Ask people for feedback. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. So, what you want to do is always have people who come back and say, this is working, this is not. Why? And then take that information and improve. Feedback that you take and stays on your WhatsApp is not useful to you at all. It's not useful. But if you hear from people, the product is nice, but the color stains. I'll give an example. When we're in the wedding industry, we discovered there's this beautiful big lily that opens like this. And I love the orange one. It's called the tiger lily. It is in white, yellow, pink, orange, I believe. But when the lily opens like this, you know the stamens in the flower? If pollen touches any fabric, it is stained for life. So what did we do? By people, brides telling us, we had one bride whose dress got stained. We took a piece of fabric, we tried on the fabric, it got stained. Our adaptation was when we are using that particular flower, as it opens, we cut off the stamens. So after that, we never had a bride complain about staining, and we used lilies a lot. All right. Because continuous feedback keeps us responsive, helps us innovate. Remember, we've gotten real data before, so we're not flying blind, we're not working from assumptions. And when doing feedback loops, turn them into collaborative circles. Stay with your peers, key customers, or mentors who are also growing. If no one in your community is growing, please, please, please find one side of your community that focuses on growth. Why is that important? Collaboration fuels creativity. There are things I cannot do. If I think about, I cannot think about. But having Joe in my corner, he has a different perspective. We are not looking to think identically. Even twins don't think identically. What we're looking to do is to be able to understand each other's perspective and use the solutions that come from there to give us acceleration. All right? Acceleration helps us take care of the opportunities that we would not necessarily see alone or not necessarily accomplish well without help. Reflect and recharge rhythm. Include rest, prayer, journaling, reflection, silence in your weekly routines. You see, in the place of stillness, you restore creativity. That restoration renews us and helps us respond with wisdom and not exhaustion. Mothers, I know we know this thing. We are tired, tired, tired. Your child asks a really simple question, and you're like, where? That thing that comes out of your mind without mouth without you thinking, where? That is where stillness happens. When my son was young, if I was having one of those days where I was volatile, I would go and sit in the bathroom, lock the door. Now he had this thing, he'd bang, 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 bang the door. But eventually we began having conversations through the door. So he'll ask me a question. So in that space, I began to see his intention is not to annoy me. It's just that life around me is difficult in a certain way. So I need to breathe. Okay. So space of reflect and recharge. Do you need time away? Mom, do you need to go away for 6 hours? You tell me, oh, I don't have money. Yeah, I know that line. But can you go and find a place to sit in silence? Can you find a friend who will not ask you questions if you say, I just need to sleep? I used to have that with a couple of my friends. And it was interesting because I could actually go to their houses. There's one particular friend, I was in town, I was in her locality, and I was really hungry and I didn't have food. I didn't have money to buy food. So I drove up to her house. I walked in, her housekeeper knows me. I'm like, hi, we chatted story kidogo, we talked a little bit. And then I asked her, kuna chai? Is there tea? Like, "Yeah, kuna mkate? Is there bread?" She said, yeah. I had a cup of tea, I had some bread. In the meantime, I called, I said, by the way, I'm in your house. Eh? I didn't have money, but I've come to eat. Nimechukua slice mbili, I've eaten 2 slices of bread and I've had some tea. I was like, but you know, it's okay. I'm like, yeah, but I gotta tell you, so that you don't come and ask your housekeeper difficult questions. The extra bread was eaten by me. And I lay on her sofa. I slept for half an hour. I was fully recharged and I went back to life. Do you have spaces like that? It could be somebody's home. It could be you have a farm that you can go to the bottom, or you can go to your village and sit by the river. What is it you can do that allows you to reflect and recharge and come back in with a strength to turn disruption into direction? Because let me say it again, change is the constant in life. So there are a couple of questions I want you to ask yourself as you reflect. What shift am I resisting that could help me grow? Where is God redirecting me, my business, my family through change? What is one adjustment I can make this week to stay focused and flexible? Sometimes when you're in a job and you're having really, really challenging times, that could be a sign you need to move. So you're really looking for a job and you can't find. I tell my young people, what can your hands do? I remember I was mentoring a young man from church and he had left home and he was asking me to pay his rent and I didn't have the money. So I asked him, what can your hands do? And this young man said, I can't find a job. I said, I'm not asking you to look for a job. I'm asking you to look for work. So what was his hands able to do? There was construction near him. So I said, Ingia mjengo, get a construction job. So he went, he got a construction job. I told him, you can pass by my house for food, but I don't have the money for your rent. I'm looking for money for my son's school fees, for my own bills. So, what can your hands find to do? So, he got a job at a construction site and he came very excited. And then I said to him, don't remain like I'm to a Maui, the guys who carry the stones. Learn a skill. And he was about to settle in just being the guy to carry the stones. I said, no. In 6 weeks, I want to hear that you've moved from there because when you do construction, maybe 3 months they're building and then you're without a job. So how do you reskill? So he came alongside the mason who was doing plaster. So when the other guys of lifting stones lost their jobs, his friend, the mason, was like, you stay. He taught him to plaster. When he was finishing plaster and the painters were coming, the mason said, this boy is a good student. So the painters taught him to paint. And he did his work so well that when the next lot of guys, who is the window guys, were coming, the painter was like, can you give this boy a job? So he was on the same site for 8 months. When he left the site, he could do basic plaster, so he could lift stones. He could do basic plaster, he could paint, and he could do windows. What was that? What work can your hand do? And with the coming ending of each portion of the building, how do you flip to the next one? But you know the skill he had to learn to stay in that construction site? Living with people, communication, diligence, showing up even when you don't feel like. So he came home one day and he said to me, Ma, I have realized you can drink black tea without sugar and sleep. And I said, it shall not be long with you like that, my son. Today he works in a restaurant. What was he doing? Adapting to understand the flow of his environment and shift just before the shift happened. That is how you turn disruption into direction. You challenge your thinking. You realize that adaptability keeps you relevant. Change is there to clarify your direction. AI and insight accelerate adjustment, and faith keeps you grounded through transition. There's a thing we commonly say that if your life is so hard, God has left you. No, maybe He's actually there. You know the story of the footprints in the sand, where this guy is walking with the Lord Jesus and he sees two footprints, and then there's a place where there's only one set of footprints. And he asks, why did you leave me? And it's like, I never left you. Where there's one set of footprints, that is me walking, carrying you. So when you understand that change and shifts are indeed signposts, roadmaps, instructions to do something, adjust something, then there is nothing that you cannot overcome. So, do we have reflections, questions? Um, Thank you, Dorothy. Really so good. Right vision in ink, tactics in pencil. Yes, absolutely. Any reflections, anything that has stood out, any question from anybody on either of the platform? So we've been saying disruption is not a bad thing. I hope you can see it now. Disruption can really drive innovation if we're able to harness it right. Okay? So increasing change is inevitable. It will happen to all of us. It will happen to the best of us. Growth is optional and intentional. Nothing can force you to grow unless you choose to grow. Even when circumstances are what's the word, are pressing you in from every side. Zinakufinya. Huh? Even when circumstances are pressing you from every side, you make that choice to change and to grow. So then adaptability turns disruption into direction because you're able to assess what's working, what's not working, who's going, who's not, and then you keep moving. Thank you, Nancy. Disruption is not a bad thing. We want our minds to understand that. then resilience becomes a more natural output from our lives. If we can understand that disruption really will not finish you, it will just push your mind to think, then you will find that growth becomes intentional. Do we have any other reflections, any other questions? Thank you, Maria. I see you. If we do not have any, allow me to pass this on to